Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night, Talking Away the Taboo. This is, we haven't done this in a couple of weeks. I think I actually got a little petrified because the last time I did a live with Javi Brooke, the connection cut out right at the end and I wasn't able to save it. So I think I've been a little bit traumatized by the whole experience. But I've decided to get over my fears and do this again, and hopefully it will save. And so all of you can be able to take advantage of the wonderful resource that Erin is. She is a person who I was very lucky to stumble across on Instagram about, I would say a few months ago, and we ended up connecting offline as well. And it has just been this really beautiful connection, this beautiful relationship. And I really appreciate the just the brutal honesty and the rawness of her content, and the fact that she is willing to share really anything and everything about the different pieces that she's gone through in this journey. And I bring her on here and to have her talk to all of you and have all of you get to know this warm, genuine, sweet, and just, okay, I'm talking about you. This warm, genuine, sweet, and just very real. I was just saying that one of the things that really struck me about you when you and I met a few months ago, was that we like just immediately connected, and it was sort of like no holds barred. I talked to you about my story, you spoke to me about your story, and then sort of the bonus was, just in terms of, I was supposed to have a baby, and this being a Jewish platform, you said, "Oh, and I'm Jewish," and I was like, "Wait, what?" That wasn't sort of the original intention. I just love connecting with people, and I was like, "Oh, wait, okay, great." Like now we have more things to talk about. So amazing.
I know, I agree. It was awesome. I know when I feel like you're like, I have to go, and we were just out there for another, or not, I was out there because, like I told you, the service here sucks, but we were on the phone for another like half hour after we both said we had to go.
Exactly. And I was pacing back and forth in the backyard, like as you and I were talking. So it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Okay. So Erin, I mean, look, obviously you have this incredible platform. You've given people already like the richness in terms of the introduction to who you are. But I mean, for people who don't know you and don't know sort of what launched you into this world, into this fertility space, can you like just give us a little bit of background and tell us a little bit of how this all happened for you?
Yeah. Do you mean like in terms of why I started sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
both the why you started sharing, and then I guess like backtracking into what was happening in your life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually conceived triplets back in 2010, with an IUI, and we did one IUI and it worked right away. I was only 26 and my husband Nick was 30. And we were lucky in the fact that it worked really quickly, but the doctor suggested that we had a reduction so that my health, my life, I guess he was saying, wasn't at risk, and same with the baby's lives. So we had to do that, and it was something we kind of never talked about again because it was very traumatic. Honestly, more so for Nick. He just was like, he still doesn't like to talk about it. And thankfully the twins were healthy. They were tiny, but I had them full term, natural pregnancy, birth. And, everything was fine. I had like just some stomach complications after because everything tore. But other than that, everything was great. I had one in the NICU for 11 days, and she's a strong little fighter and made it through. And then we kind of just never talked about everything that happened. I mean, we kind of just like, we just pretended like we had this normal, and normal is a very general term, right? But,
Right.
but like it was, everyone would ask, oh, are your twins? Everyone asked us,
Right.
did you do IVF? And I'm like, no, we didn't even like to say that we did infertility treatments because at the time, we thought we were very young. I mean, we were young, but we just thought anybody that needed fertility help was, in their 40s or something older, and that's why they needed help. We had no idea. Nor did we take time to research, nothing. We were very naive.
And can I just bring you back before you move
Please.
forward? Can I just bring you back for a second?
Yes.
What was the impetus, just to tell everyone, I mean, look, I know your story, but what was the impetus for you? I mean, again, 26 going through an IUI at that point, like, how did you even get to that point? Like, how did you know you were struggling? Like, just talk us through a little bit of that, because there's so many people, specifically, I know in this community, in my community, who are young and who are just trying to figure this out, who are recently married, who like don't understand everything that's going on with their bodies and don't know the right time of when to go, how to go. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we decided to start trying. I went off the birth control pill that I'd been on since I was like, I don't know, 14, whenever my period started, 15. And then I wasn't getting a period, and I knew that, sometimes it takes time to get a period. And we kept taking pregnancy tests. I went through like multiple boxes. I kept thinking like this has to be wrong because I'm not having a period, and I didn't really understand. So the trauma with that kind of started very, very early on, in terms of like I would literally pee on it every way that you could think of, because I just thought I wasn't doing it right. And so then we finally went in about 4 months after starting to try to my gynecologist, and was just kind of asking like why, what's going on. And she kind of took a look, and she's like, well, you're not ovulating. You don't ovulate on your own. So she said, I'm going to definitely need fertility help. And so then she referred us to the fertility center where we conceived the twins with the IUI. So the reason I wasn't getting a period is because I was not ovulating. I had a lot of follicles. I still, even to this day, always have a lot of follicles. They're just not, they don't mature, which then they don't drop. So
Right. And were you given a diagnosis of PCOS, or was it just like, this is your body, this is what you do, and that's sort of the story?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, like all my levels were fine. My, like all my hormone levels at the time were fine. Everything was like very normal.
Yep.
For me, and no major diagnosis. Just that I would need help with ovulation.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, so that's why we went in for that.
So now coming back forward, so you'd been through this traumatic, medical termination basically, and had the twins, thank God, and had, also a traumatic experience in terms of one of them being born in the NICU, and sort of never discussing a number of the things that had happened. And so then what?
So then, Eliana finally got to come home, and we kind of just started adjusting twin life. I don't remember the first year. It was just a big blur, but I'm sure most new moms feel the same way, whether it's 1 or 4. And, we just pushed through. They ended up growing, like their weight, everything's great. She's now like the strongest little girl I know. She's a gymnast, so she's like all muscle. Yeah. But again, we didn't talk about any of it. We didn't talk about any of the trauma. We didn't talk about any of like nothing. It was just like business as usual. I ended up having the diet. I can write this, but I can never pronounce it. Diastasis recti.
Yes, diastasis recti. Yeah.
Yes, I had that surgery because like I was 6 months postpartum, and people were still like, when are you due? When's the baby coming? I'm like, okay, we need to fix this.
Yeah.
And my back was in a lot of pain, and I had a hernia just from, I'm a small person. And so I, carried twins full term, even though they were tiny. you have a lot going on. So I did that. And then after that, like I said, we just kind of, we raised the girls. Nick and I went through a lot with our marriage. I've written about this, but there was some verbal abuse that was happening. He, I think, just was not able to deal with a lot of like his past and a lot of trauma that he had gone through, a lot of anger that he had even before meeting me, that was from like childhood and stuff. And I also think that all the infertility stuff attributed to it.
That it added to all of that. And
yeah. So I didn't know what to do because, I was a stay-at-home mom. When the abuse started, it was, pretty much when the twins were born. I remember fighting and arguing and crying, and it was a lot. And then also taking care of twins. But I just thought there's no way I can like divorce him right now and figure it out. Like it was just not an option.
Right.
So we went through a lot, and we started seeing a therapist, but it was more me asking him to come to therapy. And so he's like, well, I'll go for you. So for a long time, it was like he decided that I needed therapy and he was going to come along for the ride. So it doesn't work that way.
Nope.
Unfortunately.
No, but you can sometimes get the other person in the room that way. And once you get them in the room, then maybe, they're willing to start working on things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He was in the room, and in the room, he, seemed like he was going to, and then a day later, it just kind of went back to, a lot of name calling, a lot of like getting upset over like, it's crazy because we are on the same page for anything like major in life, and then it was always like little things like, why did I buy the wrong power bar? Like literally, those were things that I was getting yelled at and
oh my gosh,
called names for. I know. So, but I had my twins and I just felt like I couldn't do anything about it. Other than, the therapy that we were already doing. And so I kind of just started to coil and like not talk. I, was always walking on eggshells. I apologized a lot. I didn't know what to do. And I thought, okay, well, this is just how it's going to be. And then after a few years, I remember I ended up getting a kidney stone. I would birth like 100 more kids before getting that again. It was the worst thing ever. I thought I was dying.
That's what everybody always says, that kidney stones are much worse than birth. So
100%.
Oh my
God. And the twins were, they were about 4, 5. And they were throughout the day, like I started feeling really weird anyways. And so I didn't know what was going on. He was at a dinner with like some friends and I was supposed to meet him. And I said, like, I don't think I can meet you. Like, I need to lay down. It ended up being where like I couldn't even like breathe. It was so painful. Anyways, I went to the ER and obviously that's what it was. Thank God. I literally thought I was going to die. So it was like, I didn't even say bye to my daughters. Like, I didn't know what was happening. I know. It was a lot. It was very dramatic, but it was a lot. And that night he literally he came home really quick to take me to the hospital. My mom met us there. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go finish dinner. So he left. Yeah. My parents were with me. We were all just sitting there, but I was like, okay, maybe at least bring back food for them. I don't know.
Right.
And he came back like 2 hours later. Then I finally went back there, and, with the ER, like you're never seen until like 5 a.m. So all in all, everything was fine. He ended up going back home before I was even done, instead of saying like, parents, you guys go,
Right.
I got home that night. My parents took me home and he was asleep and the doors were locked. I was like, good.
Oh my
Glad
goodness.
people care about me.
Oh my goodness.
So that was honestly the day I realized I needed to put my foot down. Because I was like, literally, I could have, God forbid, died in the hospital and he wouldn't have known.
Right. Right.
So it was about Valentine's week, and we had plans to go to dinner, and I wrote him a letter, and we went to dinner, and I gave it to him at dinner, and it basically said, unless things change, we need to get a divorce, you know?
Yeah.
So that got him, I don't know what happened, but he got really upset. I mean, like really sad. And I said, let's put a timeline on this because I can't wait around and see if you change for more than a certain amount of time. So we gave each other 6 months. I mean, I'm sure I had some changing to do too. And I was not expecting, but literally a full 180 change with him. He started going to therapy by himself. For at the beginning, he was going like weekly, every couple weeks, and then we were still going together. And he finally just talked about all of his past, like growing up, and his dad left him, and just all the stuff that he has built up. I'm not going to sit here and tell you his whole life story, but he changed, and it's still shocking to me because I love him, but I was not expecting it. So that was good. We got back on track.
And do you think, I guess the question is, do you think like, look, based on your, I guess like, what were your parents saying at that point, and sort of what were like, and based on everything that you had been through, even through your fertility treatments and the early part of your marriage and meeting, like how did all of it, like, how did you put it all together in your head and like try to figure out like, what the heck is going on here? Like, why is this all like just talk me through some of like your thoughts at that time and sort of how the fertility, was woven into that.
Yeah. So I just, I know he was always he didn't like to talk about anything, like no feelings, nothing like deep. And I'm the complete opposite. I'm very vocal, I'm very verbal. And I knew some of his past, even though he didn't like to talk about it. And I always in my head, I'm like, there has to be something that's making him act this way, And then when he never wanted to talk about the fertility, and all this stuff to me just kind of like was like an aha moment that I was like, don't you want to talk about this to see if it even helps you feel better? Like, forget about me, but just for your sake, because clearly I feel like there's something deeper,
Right.
that you're not able to get out, and maybe I'm like, maybe I'm just not the person for you to speak to about it initially. And maybe there's somebody else that you'd feel more comfortable letting it all out at first. And I don't know. I think just me saying like, it's either get help or we're done.
Right.
Finally, and I don't know why I know why I finally got the courage, but I think, the girls were a little bit older. My parents, were definitely supportive. I mean, I had even gotten to see a divorce lawyer just to get everything, like my eggs in a row before even mentioning that to him, just to make sure, like, in case
you were covered, right?
Yeah, because if he would, I didn't know how he was going to react. So if he were to tell me like, okay, fine, let's get it, I wanted to make sure I was prepared. So, and I don't think he even knows that. I don't think he's watching.
Right. Okay, well, you'll let him know later, or someone will let him know. I mean, I guess like, the question I have is, there are so many people that have like, look, men and women are different, right? And especially in this space where, you're going like, regardless of whatever trauma you've had before. I mean, what we know is that infertility and pregnancy loss, like any kinds of, difficulty in this realm, whatever difficulty you're having, it's compounded by whatever happened in the past. Like if you've had stuff in the past, it makes it much more difficult to deal with the difficult now. And that's like really with any trauma. It's not only fertility. Like it's if you lose your job, if you have cancer, if there's an addiction, like it's sort of like anything that you have, if there's previous trauma, it's going to be harder to deal with the trauma now. But the issue is, right, that there are so many, like, men and women are different. And I'm not even like, forget about the stereotypes, just like the best relationships work in that there's a yin and yang, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
usually the person who is really vocal and the person who's less vocal, or the person who's, you know, more outgoing and the person who's less outgoing. So I guess like how, look, for you, it was very clear that he was not dealing well because it was coming out in forms of like verbal abuse to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like for someone else who's in this situation, who like can't get their spouse to open up, who can't like get, like feels like maybe they're bottling it up, like what do you say to those people? How, what are your suggestions to help them work through some of these pieces and still try to maintain their relationship?
It's hard. I think to start, I think finding a space where you guys can just talk. I mean, like, and I don't mean like deep conversations, you know, if those aren't happening yet, that's fine. For example, Nick and I learned that going outside and taking a walk by ourselves, even we do this every weekend and we put it on, you know, as what we need to do and put in front of every other plan, really helped us be able to open up. I mean, like whenever he shares anything, it's when we're walking. So I think
Right.
finding a space where you both feel safe to be able to talk was a good starting point for us. I think that if you're the type of person that is okay with sharing, then you opening up a little bit and even not even expecting your partner to open up, but just by doing it, sometimes can really spark the other person to want to say something about, you know, their life. So to me, like, I think starting off with that, I think obviously if it gets to the point where I feel like I let it go for too long, I definitely think I should have said something much sooner and put my foot down much sooner. I feel like I needed to also because my kids were now understanding and seeing
Right.
things.
Right.
And that really scared me because I didn't want them to see me in that position, nor for them to think it's okay. I didn't want them to think their dad was this person.
Right.
So that was a huge trigger for me. Um, but again, if your partner just doesn't want to open up, like I said, I think it's finding a space where you guys can just talk about anything. Um, and then, you know, slowly, I think integrating how you feel and your feelings and just say, look, like, I just want to tell you what's been going on with me, how I feel. What do you think about this? It's just such a hard,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
No, there's no easy answer. It was more
Mm-mm.
just, you know, for you as someone who's been through it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's one thing that's been on my mind, is something that I really wanted to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
because people message me all the time, you know, I want to tell people, but my husband doesn't want to talk about it, or I
Mm-hmm.
can't get my husband to talk about it, or my wife won't talk about it. I'm ready to talk about it, but she
Yeah.
doesn't want to talk about it. And what do I do? So there a lot of times there is this disparity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess so. So then when when for you, like I want to hear sort of the rest of the story and obviously where you are
Sure.
now, but also like when for, like when was the, like, okay, now we're in a better place and now we're going to start trying, and like, oh gosh, like what was the, you know, what was the timeline there?
Yeah, so we kind of were in a much better place. The girls were turning 5. And then when they turned 6, I was just kind of like, okay, I feel like now I really want another kid. You know, we've been doing really well for over a year or more. We were actually better than I think, have ever been, even before getting married. And we both said, okay, we think we're going to need fertility treatments, but we're not sure because of everything we've been told. And you know, people always say, oh, you never know. Sometimes you can get
Right.
pregnant. That like really, really stuck with me. Because I had a nurse tell me that right after I conceived the twins that, you know, since I did fertility treatments once, a lot of people get pregnant easily after that because they've already done it or something like that. So that always,
You wrote a post about this.
yeah,
I know it was
I
so,
did.
yeah, the things people say, like also like, oh, it's actually good that you had a miscarriage because you'll get pregnant much easier now.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
I
I
mean,
was told that too.
yeah,
No,
I mean, crazy things people say.
yeah, I know. So, I mean, we said, let's just try. I mean, to be honest, we were never really on much birth control for those 6 years because um, I just don't like it. So, and we always said we wouldn't mind having another kid. I was put on birth control off and on because my OB really wanted me to have a period because she said it's just healthier for me to
Yeah.
bleed. Um, but I wasn't consistently on it. But and I never got pregnant. But so then in my head, I was like, well, but we didn't really try. So we tried for the summer. This was like from June to about September. And when it wasn't working again, we are like, well, let's go to a fertility center, even though we had said we weren't going to do that. We did.
Yep.
And we jumped right into IVF because we were nervous of having multiples again since we, ended up conceiving triplets. And we knew we just wanted one. So we're like, at least this gives us a much bigger chance of putting one in and controlling that. We went into it very naively. We went to the same fertility center where we had the twins, but now it had grown it was just night and day. It used to be super small and it was like huge. And, he's like, okay, so, it should be fine. There's, again, my levels and everything were normal. And we thought we would be pregnant by December. So we went through one round. I only ended up with one PGS tested normal embryo.
Wow.
And I was only 32. And we transferred it and it failed. I was actually in New York because I am obsessed with it. I mean, I've told you.
Yeah.
And we decided we go all the time and we had never been in the winter. And my husband's like, I'm going to take you in the winter and then you're going to see. And actually, I loved it. So I was like, nope, didn't work. I did get frostbite on my feet from all the ice skating. But it was that winter that it was like the coldest winter I think you guys had in so long.
I definitely remember a very cold winter, but it feels like, with global warming,
yeah, all the time.
Who knows? But anyway,
I know. Yeah. But so we did all this ice skating. I'm like, look, if we lived here, we wouldn't go ice skating the coldest week of the year. We would wait.
Right.
So anyway, but I found out there that it didn't work. And I said, okay, well, let's just do it again. I was devastated, but I'm like, let's just jump and do it again. We did the whole thing over again, another retrieval, same results, one
embryo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had 3 and then we always send them off to get tested. And one came back normal, one came back abnormal, but enough to be able to transfer in. So we transferred the 2, and they didn't take. So that was really hard. And then I decided, I was like, well, let's just do an IUI, whatever. If we get multiples at this point, it's a blessing, right? So it didn't work again. I didn't even make it to my blood test day. I actually ended up just getting my period, and it was just very traumatic because you're like, why am I bleeding? I'm not supposed to bleed yet. And so then that took us pretty much about almost a year of this first year of trying fertility treatments. And he really wanted to take a break. I didn't because, when you're going through it, you feel like taking a break is like you're not trying to have a baby.
Right. And the clock is ticking and you're wasting time. And
yeah.
What if, and we only got one and we only got 2. And if I wait longer, it's going to be, Yes.
All of that. So I was really upset about it. We argued about it for a while. And then finally I was like, all right, let's at least, I'm good if I have a time, so it's you're going to tell me when, what day, at what time can I start again? Then we'll do it. So we did. We agreed on the 3 months, and it was great. I actually trained, and I got my yoga certificate. I can teach yoga now. So it was actually really good, and it was good to get back to myself, to get back to my twins. I mean, I always say this, but the breaks are actually always really
Always.
amazing.
No,
It's
well,
always a good thing.
right. In hindsight, the breaks are incredible, but
Hmm.
foresight, you're like, oh my God, this seems like an
Yeah,
eternity. I don't want to do this. It's horrible. Why are they making me wait? Yes,
exactly.
everyone always says exactly the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So it was the same thing. And then we started up again. We actually ended up switching clinics because we kind of were feeling like we were just a number. I emailed my nurse, and I said, okay, we want to try again. You know, should we meet the doctor? Oh no, I'll just email you. I'll just email you what you need to do, and I'll put in the prescription for your medication. I'm like, what? I haven't seen the doctor in like 6 months.
Right.
So how we haven't
Right.
done any test, like, no.
Right.
So that threw me off. And so we switched doctors, and I loved this new clinic. The nurses were amazing. My biggest thing with my previous clinic was that I had a nurse practitioner do every single exam, which is fine. For me, it kind of became like, how do you know, where I'm at, what I'm doing, because there were so many people involved all the time.
Right.
And I only saw my doctor probably like 2 or 3 times within the year.
Wow.
So in this new clinic, I just was like very adamant on I need to see my doctor every time I'm here. It can't be a different one. It needs to be the same, you know,
Yep.
just because I felt like I had so much trauma from all of the other
Yep.
situation. So this was great. He did every exam, everything when nurse was in the room, but he performed everything. We did another retrieval. So this was my third retrieval. And this time Nick and I decided not to test the embryos only because we were hearing so much back and forth about it.
Yep.
And so we're like, let's just do something different. Like maybe it can work. Sure enough, we got pregnant. And this was now in January 2019. And at week 8, I miscarried, which was when I was supposed to graduate from the fertility center. So that was really hard because, you know, then you think like, okay, this is going to work. And then especially if you get pregnant, you're like, well, it has to work. You know, we've tested everything kind
Right.
of.
Right.
So that was, you know, like vividly remember to this day that day. We had already told the twins we were pregnant, which that was hard because we had seen a heartbeat. So we thought, okay, well, we're good now. So telling them was really hard. You know, we kind of had to explain that the baby just didn't have enough of what it needed to survive, and the baby died. And then they told all their friends the next day. So I had to make some phone calls. um, you know,
I was going to say that there's, you know, I've talked about this a lot with my community. Like, there's no right way to do this, right?
yeah.
Like, it is like, especially also sort of in the general Jewish community. I was actually having this conversation. I was talking to Alex today from oh gosh, I'm like losing
when everybody matters.
whatever. Yes, exactly. And we were just talking about how, like, you know, there's all of this like stigma surrounding like telling people about pregnancies early on. But then the problem is that if God forbid you end up in a loss, then like, so then what's that conversation like? It's like, hey, by the way, I'm not pregnant. I didn't tell you I was pregnant, but now I really need support. Like, it's just like, there's no right way to do this.
I agree. No, I agree. And I actually hadn't told my friends, so then I had to tell them the same thing. I said, "Hey, I was pregnant, but now I'm not." And it was just, it's all hard. I mean, it was all just, you know, and then the girls kept asking like, well, are we going to have a baby, you know? And I'm like, well, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying. My miscarriage lasted a really long time. I ended up having to take 2 of the misoprostol pills to help you miscarry. And I bled through like sheets. And I mean, it was just nuts. And then they wanted me to catch all of my tissue and bring it into the clinic to test it. My brother's an MD. He's like, just so you know, it's probably not, most of the time they can't test it. They couldn't test it. So we never really knew why I miscarried. I want to believe that it was because the embryo wasn't a good embryo.
Right.
But I ended up, who knows? We don't know. And so I ended up having to have a DNC even after all of that 3 months later because I was still bleeding and my levels weren't quite coming down all the way. Um, my HCG levels were still like there.
Yep.
So I did the surgery and finally, like 3 months later, I was finally could close that, close the door. It's
Yep.
a bit dramatic, but did that, took another trip to New York, um, and came back.
Because in the midst of all that, you needed some TLC because you
Yeah,
had just
we
been through
all
a
did.
lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So our biggest thing was like we tried to travel every time we either had a break or we had bad news, or, I mean, we love traveling anyways, but it was like a good way to kind of get distracted.
Yes.
Especially with all the waiting because, I had had my DNC, but I couldn't do anything because your body has to adjust.
Yep.
So it was nice. And then we came back and I actually insisted on the embryos being thawed and biopsied and tested and then refrozen. One came back normal, but unfortunately, because we rethawed it or because we thawed it and then refroze it, the quality went down a lot because, it's the egg now is
Yep.
going through trauma, or the embryo
Right.
is. We transferred it anyways. It didn't work. So, oh gosh, that was like my fourth transfer. We decided to do one more retrieval the summer of 2019. And my husband's like, look, now we can start fresh. Like, we'll test the embryos, we'll everything. So we did. This time we actually got 3 normal embryos, which was awesome. Yeah, PGS tested and everything. So that
Amazing.
was what's crazy is that I was the oldest, and
Right.
of all my retrievals. So everyone
Right.
says, like, do it now. And while I
Yep.
do agree, it was also interesting that,
Right. We think that these things make sense, but of course they
yeah,
don't.
no,
Like,
they
of
don't.
course.
No.
Yeah.
So did that. And then the doctor thought it was great. Fine. Okay, let's transfer that August. And then that one failed too. And I was just lost because this was now my 5th failed transfer essentially. And we didn't know why. I mean, because again, everything is still normal. My levels, my this, my that, everything.
Right.
The embryo was normal. So they did a pelvic MRI and then also like a biopsy hysteroscopy. And they found that I still had some inflammation from the miscarriage.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, so this was now, I don't know, 6 months later.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then he said I had a form of adenomyosis.
Yep. It just
Which
explain to people what
yeah.
adenomyosis is.
So it's just basically how my doctor explained. He's like basically just if you look at your uterus, it's not going to look perfect. He's like, he finally told me every woman that has had anything done to their uterus or has given birth or has had a pregnancy has a form of it. It's a very, 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 very small form of endometriosis,
Yep.
but it's definitely not to that degree by any means. So my doctor at the time put me on letrozole for 3 months, and to try and control or to minimize the amount
Right.
that I had because it wasn't much. But so we took a break, went back to New York, went to the U.S. Open. It was great. The things I remember.
All I keep thinking is that you and I met in the midst of COVID.
Probably.
And I was just thinking, like, if only like COVID hadn't happened, like you would have, like, I mean,
I would have been out there.
You would have been out here, and
Yeah.
you and I would have met in person at this point,
100%.
at least a number of times. It feels like,
100%. Oh yeah, we were supposed to do a baby moon there. It was all this stuff, all these plans.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I came back and I was on that, and then finally at the it was like end of November we did our 6th transfer, and now I was like, okay, we've fixed everything, fixed everything.
Right.
We're good. Transferred another one of the healthy ones, and again it failed. So this was now my 6th failed transfer. I was probably the most depressed at that time.
I honestly, like, I'm listening to you recount this, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know how you weren't in a major depressive episode, like, months and months and months before that. Like,
I mean, I'm sure I was to a certain degree. I think for me, like, constantly having a plan of what's next really, really helped my mental state. I don't think I ever had a minute to really unpack what was happening because I was always like, let's move on. What else can we do? What's next? What's
Right.
next? What's next?
Right.
Which is a good and a bad thing. I don't know. That's kind of how I coped,
1,000%.
you know?
1,000%.
So, but I don't know what was happening, but I was just like really depressed and like scary depressed because I was just like crying like every day. And also I think I had the most medication I had ever had. So I know all of that was coming out of my system. But it was really bad. It lasted a really long time. And when that didn't work, we decided to switch doctors again, not clinics, but we had talked, actually the doctor that had done my retrieval, I really liked, and we had talked to him a few times here and there, and then we said, why don't we just go talk to him, and see how it is. So we did. I had like a huge list of questions that I had gotten from social media and everywhere else, just like suggestions, and he kind of went over everything for me, and he was just very like, he's like, look, you have been basically flipping a coin and it's not landed on the right side. He's like, there's nothing on this paper, there's nothing with your body that I can see that is preventing you from getting pregnant. He's like, it just hasn't happened. He's like, so keep trying if you want, and it'll happen. Plain and simple. Literally, like that's what he said.
I'm like shocked. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I don't think I've ever heard a doctor say like, don't worry, it'll happen.
Yeah.
Like, it's shocking. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he wasn't like, I 100% guarantee and I'll put
Right.
money on. But the way he was saying it was like, look, it's luck. There's a lot of luck that has to go into it. And it kind of made me feel, I don't know why, but it made me like feel really it made me feel a lot better and
Yeah.
more confident, because I thought, okay, well, just because all these other ones didn't work doesn't mean this next one won't work.
Right.
Because I had told Nick I was done. I'm like, I can't. And he's like, look, we have one more healthy, normal embryo. Like, it would be crazy not to try it. So after meeting with him, we decided to switch over to him within the same clinic. It was a little awkward, but I mean, like, gotta do what you gotta do.
Exactly.
And I also wanted to make sure my lining was really thick this time. I had always had like a 7.5-ish lining when it was all said and done. And my clinic believes that anything between 7 and 8 is great. But I said, you know what, maybe for me, it's not.
Right.
So I said, it's not going to hurt if it gets to 9 or 10. And so that's what we shot for, no pun intended. And I took injections, estrogen injections this time. And it got to a 9.8, which was
Wow.
awesome. Yeah. And we transferred. It was like probably like the best transfers I'd ever had. I just was very relaxed because in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about what he said, and I kept thinking like, okay, I can also keep going after this. Like, thankfully, we're able to financially keep going. I'm not that old yet. It's not really my last one,
Right.
if I don't want it to be.
Right.
And so we did, and I went into it. I didn't, I wasn't like crazy about what I'm eating, what I'm doing, when I'm moving, when I'm not moving. I just kind of coasted. Yeah. And it worked. And now I'm, God, 35. I'll be 35 weeks on Saturday.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I keep thinking it's so interesting, but I love what he said, and sort of how you just like how you put that into your head about how like anything can happen. Like there's no reason why it didn't happen beforehand, and sort of like anything can happen. And it's just reminding me, because when I was pregnant with my twins and I had 4 previous, this, so I had many followers know this also, when I had 4 previous second trimester losses along with another early loss, I like, and we, again, like we went in, I was like, I'm going to get pregnant one more time and we're going to try this. And that's it. And I kept like the mantra I kept saying to myself that entire pregnancy, and it just like when we got pregnant and all the way through, was anything can happen. Like just because something bad happened before, and many, many times before.
Oh my God, I know. I can't imagine.
Mean doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. And like, I had terrible anxiety, like anxiety through the roof. Like, let's like call it what it is.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I kept replaying this, like this mantra of anything can happen. So why not?
Right. Agree. Yeah. And I mean, that was kind of like what made us, or what made me feel comfortable like moving forward. And he's just, I love him. I like literally still, I think I message him like at least a couple times a week. I'll have questions about my friends and about it. He just like through DM too, because I got him. I was like, you need to be on Instagram. So yeah, it's surreal to be here. I going through COVID, I mean, being stuck doing all that with COVID has not been the best. But you know, we're still very lucky to be here. I always say like we literally did the transfer like a week, 2 weeks before everything closed.
Wow.
So we got lucky with that.
Wow.
But obviously Nick hasn't been able to come to any appointments, and you know, what you imagined it looking after 3 years of trying is definitely not this.
Yep.
But everybody's dealing with something they didn't imagine, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Someone's writing here that she said that she read that you followed Lisa Olson's book, and she's asking whether it was helpful or what exactly motivated you after reading the book.
Lisa Olson's book. No.
Tell us more. Tell us more. Which book and which piece?
Maybe I'm like blanking on names.
All right,
but
it's all good.
Sorry.
No. It's all, look, we're all loud. We're all loud. Okay, so now, I mean, tell me, like, you know, I've been talking a lot on the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby page about like the interweaving, however you want to say it. I don't even know if either one of them are actually a word.
I'm sure they are.
Okay, fine. I'll thank you very much. About like the sort of Jewish communal life and like the expectations that we put on ourselves, or that the community or our families put on ourselves, and also this overlaying of the Jewish holidays and the heaviness of this time of year. Like, can you like walk me through, like you've been through a tremendous amount of trauma. Like I'm now putting aside like everything like 6 years prior to this, right? Like, and like that in and of itself is a whole story. But like now with this whole process also of like failed transfer, another IUI, and you know, it seems like dozens of IVF. Like, you know, what, how has sort of your communal experience, your family, like how is that piece like played into all this for you?
So we didn't talk about that we were doing IVF, like just how we never really shared before. For a couple years, the first 2 years, we didn't really talk about it. I've kind of told my parents, and then it became very. There was a lot of pressure to tell them what was happening when, you know, there's days that you don't want to talk about, there's days that you do. And it was like, well, when's your beta? And I go like, Mom, I'm not going to be able to, I don't think I'm going to tell you. And she's like, okay, fine. Like, you know, the rolling of the eyes. And I'm like, okay, this is not happening if we ever have to do this again. So for a while, I just kind of shut down. I had like 2 or 3 friends that I talked to, but you know, and I think what happened is all of that became really heavy because I was carrying it all on my shoulders. You know, I hadn't opened up on Instagram. It's been about a year now since I opened up on here, or maybe a tiny bit less. But there was nobody. I didn't know this community existed. So it was just a lot, you know, like going through the holidays, going through birthdays, going through all of that stuff without being able to tell anyone like why I was feeling so depressed and so sad was a lot. And that's what led me to write a blog and start sharing. And then I just kind of said one day, I'm just going to open up so that I don't have to tell each person individually. And if they feel like reading, then that's great. If they don't have to. And so I did. And so that's kind of what led me to this is opening it all up and writing it all out. And the more I did that, I think the better I felt. It was just kind of like my journal. But it allowed me to still not have to pick up the phone and talk to people if I didn't want to, because it's all right here kind of
Right.
a thing. Um, I think going through the Jewish holidays, to answer your question, was hard, because obviously you never understand why things are happening.
Right.
You want to keep believing, and I do, and you want to keep thinking like, okay, there must be a reason, but I've, you know, gone many times, and I've written about this too, but one friend finally said to me, look, there's not always a reason why bad things happen. And it kind of stuck with me, because like that kind of helped me be okay with the bad things happening, if that makes any sense. Like, I know some
Totally.
people do search for a reason, and it helps them, and that's great. But I still don't know why, I don't know why I miscarried. I don't think I miscarried so that I could, give birth to this child. I don't correlate the two, because I feel like I could have done that without the miscarriage.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
so that's
And also, and you didn't miscarry because you needed to start a blog and,
no,
start this massive account and help more people. Like, you didn't do, like, that didn't happen either. Like, I hear that a
no,
lot also, like, oh, now you
maybe
know why you
no.
had to do this, because now you're spreading your message. And I'm like, no,
No, I would have been
no,
fine if I would have never shared, and eventually I'm sure I would have had to in some way, just for my own sanity. But like, I would have. I always say, like, would I have rather not miscarried? 100%. Like, I love this community. I love that I am able to help people, and everybody helps me. I mean, probably more so than I help them, to be honest. But um, I would have been fine not miscarrying.
totally, totally.
So,
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, how were, besides your parents sort of like wanting to be sort of heavily involved, and then not like you not being able to handle that, because it's hard for anyone to be heavily involved in this process, like when
yeah.
things are so hard and so difficult. It's just like, it's impossible.
Hmm.
I very much felt the same way. I was like, my parents knew I was going through things, but I also didn't share at the time. We shared later, some things, not all things, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
um, do you think that they like had any sort of preconceived expectations in terms of like, you should be having more kids, you should not be, like, was there any sort of pressure you felt coming from them in regard to that?
No, I think there was still some judgment left from what Nick and I went through, with our marriage. I think that there was a lot of like, huh. Those were always like, I would say, oh, we're going to do this. And they're like, huh.
Got it.
And I
Yeah.
cannot handle those.
Right.
And I feel like that's where that was stemming from, which, look, obviously, if my kid's ever going through something like that, I don't know how I would react. I don't blame them for having whatever reaction they had, because they
Right.
saw us at a very, very bad, low, low, low.
Right.
But there was a lot of that, a lot of like, it's a different generation. Therapy is not a thing for them.
Totally.
So for them to really truly believe that all that really changed is probably, even to this day, probably still somewhat difficult to think about. So it was more of like just me feeling like they just they weren't understanding that everything was different. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I always say, I'm not sitting here sharing every little thing with them, so I can see, and that's another reason why writing everything out, and then them really seeing what actually happened and my feelings and all of that, maybe helps them a
Right.
tad bit more.
Right. Do they follow you on Instagram?
My dad's not on Instagram or any social media other than LinkedIn, I think.
Right.
But my mom does, and she'll read, and I know she'll show my dad sometimes. And sometimes when there's things I really want them to see, I'll say, "Hey, I just
Hey, you
posted
might want to
something."
look at this. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like, go
yeah.
take a look at that thing I just put up.
I have. So even like my miscarriage, because even when I was miscarrying, I didn't want, I remember my mom came over, and I was like, I don't want you to come over. I don't know what I want. So once I wrote it, I did have her make sure she read it, and she just kind of, I think they did understand more. But again, it's a different generation. You don't talk about
Totally.
things, and
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Look, Erin, I'm so appreciative for you being here
Oh,
and sharing all this. Look, I mean, you share one of the things that's so incredible about your space is the fact that you do share all of these different snippets of your journey and the different, and you really go in depth into like and there are nuances, but they're important nuances and
yeah.
really helped to shape who you are and your experience with this
Hmm.
journey. So I I knew that it was important. I knew that I wanted you on here because
No.
I knew that you've such a just a giving and warm way of sharing everything that you've been through and such an open book. And it was important for me to have you here to because your story is unique. And look, everybody's story is unique.
Everybody.
Let's have that be clear.
Yes,
But I think
absolutely.
like my what I try to do with this page is try to bring as many different stories as possible. And I think
And
that
you do a
this,
great job at it.
thank you. I look, we're all just trying to help people,
Yeah.
right? Like that's really it. And so I thank you. What
Thank
if
you.
people want to, I'm sure that there are going to be people afterwards who want to reach out, who have specific
Yeah,
questions about different points,
please.
maybe even about therapy or
Hmm.
marital, whatever it is. The best way is to DM you and
Yeah.
reach out there. Okay.
DM me, or even email. I've gotten a few emails from people, so whatever is easiest for you. But I have a really big issue with uh, if I don't get back. I have anxiety if I don't get back to people. So I will 100% get back to you. Like, you have
I,
my word.
I was going to say that there is a reason why you and I clicked
Yeah,
immediately.
I cannot handle like I like I'll message somebody and I'll ask Nick. I'm like, oh, why hasn't she like written back to me? And then not even through DM and just like email or something. He's next like it's been like not even a full 24 hours. I'm like, that's insane. I'm like, we all have access to everything now. What is like obviously I know it's called everybody has a life, but
Exactly.
I don't know. I have this thing. I'm like, I don't get it.
Sure.
I don't get not getting back to people. So
Exactly.
I will get back to you, I promise.
Exactly. Look, I also make it my business. I answer every single DM and I
Yeah,
try to do it as soon as
me
possible
too.
because look, the reality is that people are suffering
Yeah.
and when they're reaching out because they have a question or a problem or
Mm-hmm.
they're worried about something
Mm-hmm.
and we all know because we've been there and we feel like there's nobody out there that will answer these
No.
questions. And if you're finally unburdening yourself to someone, like it's almost like you want the answer now. And so when
Yeah.
it takes like a little bit of time, you're like, oh, I know before I go to bed, like it's the last thing that I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
at are my DMs. And the
Me
minute that
too.
I wake up, it's the first thing that I look at.
Me
And
too.
look, sometimes I know like I can't write back right away. And there's some
Yeah.
like because I want to give it my
Do you
full
want to take
proper
time?
response and I want to take
Totally.
time. But
But you
I
will get back.
I
Yeah.
try my best to get back in a timely manner
No, me
because it's
too.
important.
Well, and I
Because it's
always feel
important.
like if somebody's taking, that's what I was telling Nick, I'm like, look, if somebody's taking their time to
Totally.
write to me, then who am I to not give them
Yep.
my time back?
Yep.
That's always been my thing. So
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Erin, thank you so
thank
much.
you, Amy. Thanks
I
for staying up so late.
please, I'm like this is early. Look, for you it's, 6:30 or whatever it is. For me,
Yeah.
the night is young.
Okay,
Like
good.
I'm not going to bed anytime soon. So it's all good.
Okay, good.
It's all good. All right. Good night, everybody. Please reach out to Erin if you have any
Yes,
other
please do.
questions, and we'll talk more
Well,
soon.
yes, I can't wait.
Okay.
All
All right.
right.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
night.
Bye.
Bye.